get to determine who is the best team in the Eastern Division, in particular with Ohio State, Michigan State. And let's not forget about Iowa, still undefeated in the Western Division. We bring in Stephanie Otey, doing work for ESPN for the Big Ten, and also most specifically in Columbus there for Ohio State. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this will be a good talk. Let's talk about those Buckeyes. So for several weeks there, they weren't impressing many people as the number one team in the country, still hanging on to number one votes, still number one in the country, but really playing lackluster. JT Barrett steps in, and we've seen over the last couple games, specifically against Rutgers, what this offense can do with Barrett at the controls.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. We had that strong start, I think, against Virginia Tech, and then we got kind of quiet, still winning games, but we didn't have that explosive offense that we did last year. And with all this expectation, where were we? And so when they made that change to JT against Rutgers, you could clearly see, they had a little bit more confidence in the offense. And we can't forget the defense too. I mean, they weren't scoring too much on us either. So, I mean, I think that they just overall as a full team came together, whereas we have so much talent and individual players. We were just waiting for them to come together as a cohesive team, and we were able to see that last weekend.
The surprise for me, Stephanie, was that this team didn't produce offensively and looked very much out of sync, and that happens with talented teams when personnel changes. But aside from losing one offensive lineman, aside from losing Devin Smith, the deep threat, and that's a big loss, all these guys have played together for 15 games last year and then into this season, so they had all that cohesion. And it was difficult to see them operate against the Northern Illinois of the world and not really come together. So just your thoughts about Ohio State moving forward. How good do you think the Buckeyes are? Do you think they're as good as they were last year? Or do you see some missing parts and pieces?
I mean, there's just so much talent on that team. It's unbelievable. I mean, the draft class is going to be incredible in 2016. But November is going to be pretty tough. I mean, as we saw from the Michigan State-Michigan game, we have both those teams up at the end of November. So, I mean, the hardest part of our season will be in the last 2 weeks. So we got to get to that point. I mean, I'm scared to think, what if those games are at the beginning of the season? Because I don't know if we would have been ready. But we'll have, we got a couple more weeks to go, and they have the bye this weekend. And, a little bit of healing. There's not many teams too banged up like Michigan State. I know they're kind of, not in the best health situation, but their coach even said that they're not even practicing. It's just lifting and running for them. Whereas Ohio State, they can keep practicing. They're a little bit more healthy, which is good to see, especially because of last year. But I think that they'll get there. I mean, offensively, I think we'll be fine. It's tough to see because, like we were discussing earlier, that Michigan State, what if we beat them but then lose to Michigan? What does that do to the Big Ten in the playoffs? So it'll be interesting. I'm very excited for November, but I am also pretty nervous.
Yeah, you bring up that game on November 21st, and that's the one game that's been circled on Big Ten calendars for the entire offseason, that it was going to come down to this one game. Well, the way Michigan's playing, they may throw a monkey wrench into it, and it came within a bad snap or a muffed punt handle of completely changing the conference race at that point. But here we stand with Michigan State just a few weeks away for Ohio State. You mentioned the Spartans' injuries. They've weathered tons of injuries in the defense and also along the offensive front. Your thoughts about Michigan State? They've kind of had to weather a lot of the same criticism Ohio State has in regards to winning ugly and not putting teams away the way you would expect the Spartans to.
Right. Well, I was actually in East Lansing last weekend for the Indiana game. And, there were close times you kept thinking, when is Indiana going to make a play to get a lead? But they were able to, hold on to their lead and get the win. But, yeah, I would like to see them healthy. Even though I am from Columbus and I am, a Buckeye fan at heart, I'm really happy to see Michigan State playing so well. I mean, this game last weekend was the first time Michigan State ever won with double digits in a Big Ten game. And so they're no longer Michigan's, little brother school. So it's really cool to see, them evolve. And like I said, that game will be very interesting when they play up against Ohio State, because they were able to beat Michigan, even though it was, at the tail end of the game, but they had that score to, do that at the end and win. So, I mean, I'm just happy for them and making them a contender in the Big Ten.
Stephanie Otey joining us, does work for ESPN for the Big Ten, and also during the Ohio State games in particular, was at the Indiana-Michigan State game, as she just let us know. And the Spartans, of course, with a miracle win against Michigan. And I think Mark D'Antonio, what he's showing us is what a brilliant coach he is, because when we think Michigan State football, it's ground and pound and it's defense, and they are throwing the ball all over the place because they've had to adjust to all the offensive line injuries and not having a great running back, although L.J. Scott probably will be one very soon as just a freshman with Michigan State. Now we go to the team up north. So they are back at it. And despite the 2 losses that they may have played themselves out of a college football playoff spot, this team is just a different team with the same personnel under Jim Harbaugh. So just your thoughts on watching Michigan football and seeing this transformation since Harbaugh arrived.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've always been great contenders in the Big Ten, and it's kind of hard to see them struggle, but it's funny to see Michigan State have that little smirk on their face, especially with a win like that. But you know, they could turn it around. And so, like I said, November is just going to be a very big indicator as to the end of the season and the postseason. So I'm curious to see. They're not in a bye this weekend, are they? Michigan.
No, Michigan's got a game at Minnesota.
Right. Well, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not too sure about Michigan, but we'll have to check that game out.
So here we go, Stephanie. This could be the scenario. Most likely, Ohio State's going to win out. They're going to be not a substantial favorite, but a slight favorite against Michigan State at home, and even going on the road to Michigan. But you know what I'm going to bring up is the loss of the Michigan State game. So the Spartans, let's say Ohio State wins that game and then turns around and loses to Michigan. It creates a 3-way tie. What happens then?
Well, it'll have to go up into debate. You know, the Big Ten Conference, their playoff will be December 5th, but we don't know. Again, Iowa, they may have to play one of the contenders. So what if they go undefeated and then they're in the chalk because they haven't played these 3 teams, Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State, they're all playing each other. And then we're completely forgetting about Iowa. So what if they go undefeated and then they're the leaders of the Big Ten? If Ohio State loses to Michigan and beats Michigan State, they're all out of 1 loss, but Iowa could go undefeated. So, you know, that might not even be a discussion if we keep Iowa in conversation.
Yeah, so it's my understanding, Stephanie, that if those 3 teams, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, finish tied with 1 loss, that they go to head-to-head, which would be exactly the same. Then they go to common opponent, and that would be exactly the same, that record. And then they go to the College Football Playoff Committee, and those standings don't come out until Tuesday night. So everybody's going to be waiting around to see who the College Football Playoff Committee ranks the highest out of those 3 teams so that they can have that team practice, get ready, hotel accommodations for not only the players and coaches, but the fans traveling to the game in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. So that could be a mess.
Yeah. I was already in Dallas and we got the news and we're like, okay, come on in. So yeah, I mean, the anticipation is nerve-wracking, but yeah, it'll be a whirlwind to see who's chosen if that were to occur.
And I'm glad, Stephanie, that you brought up Iowa. They still seem to not be getting a whole lot of respect. People assume that whoever wins out of Ohio State, Michigan State is going to trample Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. But this team's undefeated. They beat a team that's really good in Pitt outside of conference at 6-1. They just continue to win their games. They've, at this point, beat who you would consider to be the second best team in the division in Wisconsin. So they've cleared that hurdle. They're going to be a substantial favorite in the rest of their games. I'm not saying that they're not going to slip up, but Iowa could finish 12-0.
Yeah, I mean, but we also have 2 teams over here that could, Michigan State and Ohio State. So you never know. I mean, what if they all lose a game that's not even against, what if Ohio State were to lose their next game and it's not even Michigan State yet, or vice versa with Michigan State. So there's a lot to think about. But I was also looking, an ESPN, their power index says that Ohio State has, what is it, a 79% chance to beat Michigan State. So, if we keep going with all these expectations, it looks like Ohio State would be the clear runner. But I don't know. I think that Michigan State does have a strong chance, especially if they keep it at this rate.
Oh, I think they do too. Ohio State is the expected winner to play Iowa, the expected winner out of the West, but we see all over college football every week that we're just focusing on the games that we expect to be competitive, but somebody else could jump out there and knock off a Michigan State, Ohio State, or Iowa. It could definitely happen. It's happened in every other conference pretty much, and it happens every season. Stephanie, it was great talking to you. Stephanie Otey doing work for ESPN around the Big Ten last week at East Lansing to see the Spartans and the Hoosiers. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.